Welcome to Midi Basics. Midi stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It is the basic concept of connecting two or more old-school musical MIDI instruments and devices, and today's USB to MIDI or virtual DAWs, digital audio workstations, digital instruments together today. Back in the late 60s, through to the 70s and early 80s, there was analog synthesizers about. Companies like Roland, Moog, Sequential Circuits, Oberheim, Yamaha, ARP, Korg etc., which you could only program the sounds by knobs, sliders and patch leads. Then in turn to control these electronic masterpieces to other synths, you had to connect an input and output patch lead CV, gate in and out, control voltage gate, to control the sync, arpeggiator up, down and random, and drum machine tempo and notes. Then Roland founder Ikutaro Kakehashi, with Sequential Circuits president Dave Smith and Sequential Circuits engineer Chet Wood, came up with the MIDI interface circuit around 1982, with the first keyboards to install the MIDI basic interface, were the Prophet 600 and Roland Jupiter 6 in 1982. Then the MIDI specifications and other manufacturers followed within 1983. CV to MIDI interfaces had to be made to sync the old synthesizers to the new MIDI instruments and devices by MIDI clock control data, but that's a whole new other subject altogether. The basic old MIDI connections have several connections, including a MIDI in, MIDI out and sometimes MIDI through. At the back of your instruments, digital mixers, samplers, drum machines, multitrack recording porto studios and digital outboard effects units etc. A single MIDI cable has 5 pins on both ends called male connectors, and female inputs have 5 input sockets per socket. The MIDI commands travel from MIDI out from one instrument into MIDI in of another instrument. Alternatively, any MIDI unit that needs to communicate or be controlled. MIDI consists of 16 channels of information in and out. Plus MIDI through is a link from MIDI into daisy chain to other MIDI devices. So a MIDI network can be set up from one MIDI interface using 16 MIDI channels via a hardware workstation sequencer or a software DAW sequencer, laptop, iPad, Mac or PC. So 16 MIDI channels can control a whole electronic sequencer band via MIDI message control data. 16 individual MIDI instrument devices monophonic, one program sound at a time, or multi-timbral MIDI instrument device. Depending on its note polyphony limits, it could handle up to 16 program sound channels at one time. Drum percussion channel is usually on MIDI channel 10, or you can assign them on any channel you prefer. But channel 10 is GM, General MIDI Standard, for 128 program drum sounds across a keyboard, drum pads, samplers or Akai MPC workstations, which can be saved as a MIDI file and play back in any MIDI device, with compatible GM sounds around the world. Later became GM to MIDI Standard, with extra features.